the situation of women in Afghanistan. I entirely agree. It seems to me quite obvious that we cannot improve the situation of women or bring about democracy by bombing or invading a country. On the other hand, the situation for women in Afghanistan has been very bad. Not only now, but for many decades. Culturally, it's difficult to change the situation. There was this morning on the Today program on the BBC, a girl, 16 years old, who was attacked as she went to school, and now she lives in this country. I wanted to ask you your opinion about that particular case. And also, you said that the Afghan women don't need, the Western intervention, the kind of Western intervention that we have at the moment in Afghanistan. And I wanted to also ask you if there is anything that people, not only in the West, but anywhere in the world, who is interested in supporting the rights and the cause of women in Afghanistan, whether there's anything that they can do.
Okay, well, let me just very quickly on those three questions. Firstly, on who caused the chemical weapons attack. I genuinely don't know, and I don't think most people can possibly know, and I wouldn't particularly like to speculate. I think whoever did it, it was completely wrong. But I do think that there are some serious journalists, for example Robert Fisk, who's put a good case that maybe it wasn't the government, but it was actually sections of the opposition. But I really don't know, as far as I'm concerned, it's not the main question, because the main question is whoever did it, it doesn't justify Western intervention in Syria, and that was always my position, whoever did it, and I think that's the best way to really approach it. The question about alternatives to capitalism is probably a kind of different meeting, a longer meeting, as well, and probably everybody in the room have slightly different ideas about this. I mean, I personally am a socialist. I think we should be a society based on production for being not for profit, and that socialism has been, there's all sorts of discrediting of socialism over the years, but I actually think it would work in a much fairer and better way, the sort of socialism I would like to see. I also think it's a much more democratic way of doing things, because people, the people who produce the wealth also control what it's spent on, and they decide what they want to be spent on. And I'm pretty sure that any group of people you met, apart from the arms manufacturers themselves, wouldn't want it spent on weapons of destruction, wouldn't want it spent on things that benefit people. But as I say, that's just my opinion on it. And just finally, on the question of women in Afghanistan, which I'm sure people will say, obviously, is much more familiar with the situation. The situation of women in Afghanistan is terrible, as it is in a whole number of countries. And you refer to the woman Malala, the woman who was shot for, the other year by the Taliban in Pakistan. Now, the real argument that we're putting is that none of these interventions has made the position of women any better. In lots of situations, it's made it worse. I mean, there's a quota for women in the Afghan parliament, but it is absolutely meaningless in terms of any real changes for women. In other words, it's a kind of cosmetic thing, and actually some women who stand up against it, who look like Malala Joya, who was an MP, were actually driven out of being MPs and were threatened, they're threatened with their lives and with injury and so on. So my argument is it doesn't make the situation any better. There are real terrible social problems and cultural problems that have to be overcome. The worst way of doing it is to have endless wars, which is what the Afghans have lived with for generations. And the only role the West can play in this is to say that the money that is spent on war should be going with unattached aid, aid without any strings and so on, should be going to help people who need basic requirements of life. None of this is happening. And they go on, you get all this stuff, isn't it terrible? Whatever it is, child marriages, rape, all the different questions which are real problems in Afghanistan. But nobody ever, in the same horrific way, talks about the corruption that Mitra's talks about who gets the money, where all the aid money goes to, all those different sorts of things. If there was actually a decent democratic system in Afghanistan, and actually the women would begin to benefit. But what happened was they replaced the Taliban with people who were equally hostile to women's rights, equally hostile to equality, and that's why the situation fundamentally has not changed, and that's after 12 years of occupation. And we should be saying enough is enough, get the troops out, and let the women of Afghanistan decide what kind of society they want